Hello everybody, Andy here again. Right, another day, another vlog. This is day 3 of the sort of week-long vlogging challenge. And I thought today I'll actually tackle a subject that Gary was talking about, Anarchy in 1814 was talking about yesterday. And he was talking about the state of radio. I mean, obviously he's talking about the US, but I thought put a bit of a UK perspective on it as well. Those of you who sort of watched me for a while will probably know that I'm involved with a radio station over here in the UK called Hastings Rock. I'm the chairman of the station, one of the presenters on the station. I've been sort of involved one way or another for a good number of years now. Started off by sort of loaning CDs etc to the station, then helping out answering the phones, and I sort of progressed my way up and sort of been now in one of the sort of the better positions. But because of the way that things work over here, it's slightly different, and maybe that's sort of indicative of what Gary was talking about. Now, in the US, from my travelling over there and my experience of radio over there, you've got a great diversity of stations. You seem to have just about every type of station, and it's especially in a major city. You get rock stations, you get your national public radio, but you also get sort of talk stations. You get just every, country stations, whatever it might be. You have a very good spread of stations. I know it's a vastly bigger country than what we've got here in the UK, but I don't know how stations are put on the air there, whether you can basically start up a station, whether you have to apply for frequencies or something. I don't really know how that works, but the British example is a bit different. That any station that is on the air is actually awarded a licence, and what happens is that the government basically, or a government run body called Ofcom, actually advertise licenses. When they think a particular town, city or area needs another licence, they will actually put out to tender, effectively. I suppose, and people apply, which we did at Hastings Rock. We applied for a local licence in 1997, which we didn't get, a full-time licence. And that's how it's done. So you can't just put a station on the air. The only way that you can then do it is if you do it illegally, and then that's not a very good way. What we have to do is, as our own station, we only tend to broadcast once a year, usually in May, because that's just the way that it works for us. But we can only do what they call a restricted service licence, which is like a mini licence, I suppose. This is being reviewed, and they're thinking about changing this sort of way that it's done. But we can apply for them, and we can apply for up to a maximum of 28 days, which is what we do. We go to the 28-day limit. They're looking at, as I said, of changing that to maybe 5 years, I believe it is, but there doesn't seem to be any change on that. We're only allowed to have those licenses under certain conditions. We're, sort of the amount of power that we're able to put out and all that sort of stuff. But it's the cost as well that's so prohibitive, I think, for us particularly. I mean, it costs us about £5,000 to £6,000, which is sort of $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 to put our particular radio station on the air for 28 days. None of us gets a penny out of it. None of us. We all put our time and our effort and a certain amount of money, obviously in some ways, into it, and we don't get anything out of it. And so you can imagine how much it would cost to sort of run a station on a more full-time basis. We have to pay for that by advertising, and as you can imagine at the moment, with the way that the global economy and everything is, it's very, very hard. In fact, we've been sort of appealing for sort of advertisers and people to sort of maybe give us some money for this year's broadcast. And we've actually got a meeting on this Thursday to decide whether we're actually going to be able to go ahead this year for our sort of 28-day stint. I hope we will, but it doesn't look too hopeful at the moment. And the station that I'm involved with is a fairly unique station. Now, rock music, I know I'm talking mainly about rock music because that's what I'm interested in, although like Gary, I love a bit of just about everything. I have what I call an open ear policy. We tend to play rock music, but we're fairly unique in as much as we play all the sort of classic rock, and right back to the sort of 50s we play blues, we'll play sort of the early Elvis Presley and all that sort of rock and roll stuff, and we'll play that right the way through, through the classic rock era, the 70s, the 80s, the punk era, right up to the noughties now, and all the new bands that are coming out, what you class as the newer music, I suppose. And there aren't many stations around that do that. Maybe it's because of the way that we're set up, the fact that we can play what we want to play. We have to be careful, we have limits, we have broadcast quality sort of standards, etc, with swearing and all that sort of thing, and what we're allowed to do on the air. We're not allowed to talk about politics, we're not allowed to talk about sort of contentious subjects. We can have our licence revoked basically and pulled at any particular moment. As I said, we're restricted to the amount of power that we put out, so that dictates of how far the area that we're allowed to broadcast in. We could never sort of, for example, apply for a licence and be countrywide and that sort of, and so many people just do not understand that. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand that until I got involved myself. We people in our country, probably across the world, presume that if you want to put a radio station on, yeah, you can more or less apply as long as you've got the backing, as long as you've got the money and the know-how, you can get up there and you can do it. You can't, as I said, I don't know how it works in the US, but it does seem a bit more open. I'd love to understand that on continent of Europe that it's pretty similar as well. I know for a fact that there's a station in France which has just opened up, and it's actually on the frequency which we usually use in Hastings, so we won't be able to use that now because of the strength of their signal. So we're sort of stuffed in a way, and I think it's a great pity, it's a great shame, because it denies a lot of people that sort of diversity that Gary was talking about there. The lack of diversity over here in Britain, it's pretty awful. The actual choice that you've got with radio stations is pretty minimal. I personally, as much as I love radio, as much as I love being on the radio, and as much as I love music, and like Gary, music is a very, very big part of my life, and has been for as long as I can remember, from a young child actually, and I've played in bands, and obviously I've been involved in lots of different ways. It's been a great part of my life, and it's very annoying that there's nothing on the radio that really appeals to me. There's no one station that I would automatically turn on to listen to for the sort of music that I want to, even if in a fairly narrow band. The one station that I do listen to over here is a station called Planet Rock, which is a digital station. Once again, you can only get that on the digital frequency or online, I suppose now. But even that, as Gary would say, it tends to play the same sort of songs. If they play an AC/DC song or a Led Zeppelin song, so you can bet your life it'll be one out of about 5 different songs. They've got a bit better, but I get struck by the lack of difference with the music, I suppose, a lack of depth maybe in the music. There's nothing too new. They started to put the odd sort of Oasis track in there or something like that, but there's nothing much newer than that, and I get a bit bored, to be honest, with that type of thing. And I think a lot of other people do. I don't want to be stuck in the past. I like having my ears opened to new music, to different forms of music, and there are no stations out there. That's why we at sort of Hastings Rock, blowing our own trumpets or blowing my own trumpet, what people like about our station, and it's very local, as I said, is that it is different. It plays music from the past, it plays new music as well, and also we allow the DJs, to be people who are informed about their music. So much time over here on the commercial stations, and effectively we are a commercial station because we rely on advertising as well. Otherwise we would not be on the air. We can't raise that £5,000-6,000, which, by the way, it pays for all the licences that we require to actually put us on air. We need that sort of money. On the other commercial stations, I know for a fact that people are only allowed to talk for like 40 seconds little slots, and I've heard that from people who are DJs in America as well. They have 40 seconds in between particular songs to sort of say their little piece. They're not allowed to sort of put a personality out there or really sort of project something that's a bit different and a bit more personal as well, and put in their knowledge. And you know, like we're doing here, you can talk freely. Yes, of course there are limits. You don't want someone talking for 5, 6, 7 minutes about a particular song or something, but some people would like that, and you don't get that sort of choice. I'm not a fan also of the way that radio works. They seem to follow the same sort of formula, and it's very formulaic, it's very boring, etc, etc. So that's a little snapshot of what it's like over here. Sorry if that's a bit boring maybe in some ways, but it might be interesting to other people, open some people's eyes as to how things work over here. You can't just put a station on the air, and for someone like us, we can only be there for 28 days at a time. We can apply for another 6 months down the line. There's so many regulations that I'd like to see it opened up with you know, within reason, of course, to something that's a bit different, something that's a bit more open, something that's a bit more interesting. And I think that's why personally I don't listen to the radio. This radio station that I listen to is like a talk radio, Radio 4 over here in Britain, which isn't talk radio as such, but it's magazine based, I suppose you could put it that sort of way. So that's what it's like over here. Very, very boring, I'm afraid. It doesn't make you want to turn on the radio. They're trying to get digital radio going. I'm wondering why the take-up hasn't been as good as what they'd liked it to have been. They had great hopes for the digital radio over here, and it just hasn't taken off really. Stations have come and gone, and that's one reason I think it's a bit too boring, it's a bit too samey, there's nothing new, there's nothing exciting, nothing sort of breaking out. Maybe even internet radio, we can't broadcast on the internet. There's lots of reasons for we can't do that because of the copyright issues. Where have we heard that before? So that's why I myself, like Gary, like something like Blip FM. You can be your own DJ, you can play your own music, and you can play whatever the hell you like as long as it's up there. So have a look for it. It's over that way. I'll put the link up there for that as well, so that you can check me out on there. How I found out about that very quickly is I actually found out about that through Twitter. So isn't that strange? Yeah, so I find out about one service by another one. And by the way, I've got 99 followers on Twitter at the moment. Maybe you want to be that 100th. I'll put the link up there as well. Anyway, I've got to leave it there because I see the time's running out. I've talked for far too long already. I shall see you again tomorrow. Anyway, thanks for your time. I'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.